love the NABE Scholarship Program because I just love how personal these scholarships are for the alumni and for the students. Being a student who grew up in foster care and then getting a scholarship for students who were in foster care and being able to connect with that donor and see the love and the passion that they have for me and being able to resonate with me and what I've gone through. God opened doors that I didn't even know were there. I'm at Calvin and my legacy is starting here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to day 4 of the January series. My name is Kristen Verhulst. I'm a staff member here at Calvin University, and it is my delight to serve as your moderator today. So thanks so much for coming out. Nearly 40 years ago, the January series launched as a lecture series right here in this auditorium. And now today it has developed into a nationally recognized program with a global reach, inviting viewers all around the world to stream in for free and to listen and learn together from wise and creative people on a range of important topics. So we're so grateful for your presence here today, and especially all of those who are watching via the live stream, and even later today will watch the archive. We especially want to welcome those of you who've gathered in spaces to be together to watch. So a warm welcome to those of you gathered in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Brookfield, Wisconsin, Pella, Iowa, South Bend, Indiana, and Grand Haven and Holland, Michigan. Glad you joined together. For all of you, there will be an opportunity for questions to Heather, our speaker today. So please get ready to send those to askjseries@calvin.edu. And for those of you watching on the screen, there's a QR code. Before I introduce our speaker today, I'd like to invite up Calvin Senior Lizzie Wickers, who's studying strategic communication here at Calvin, and she'll open our time in prayer.
Good afternoon. Please join me in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity in being here today, both virtually and in person. We are blessed to be part of the Calvin community where education can go beyond just the classroom. As we gather together today, let us listen intently and allow your goodness to be demonstrated through today's speaker, Heather Templeton Dill. We thank you for keeping us safe on the roads, and may we reflect who you are in all that we say and what we do. In your holy name, amen.
Thanks, Lizzie. Heather Templeton Dill is president and CEO of the John Templeton Foundation, whose mission it is to support the interdisciplinary research and to catalyze conversations that inspire awe and wonder. The foundation works to create a world where people are curious about the wonders of the universe, free to pursue lives of meaning and purpose, and motivated by great and selfless love. The foundation was established in 1987 and named for its founder, Sir John Templeton, Heather's grandfather. Prior to assuming the role as president, Heather served as executive liaison to the president under her late father, Dr. Jack Templeton. The work supported by the foundation crosses disciplinary, religious, and geographical boundaries across a range of subjects in the sciences, philosophy, and theology, from gratitude and hope to the psychology of purpose and positive neuroscience. As president, Heather has guided the foundation in awarding more than 1,500 grants, totaling more than $1 billion. One of the main programs at the foundation is the Templeton Prize. It is one of the world's largest annual individual awards to honor individuals whose exemplary achievements advance her grandfather's philanthropic vision, harnessing the power of the sciences to explore the deepest questions of the universe and humankind's place and purpose within it. And we note here at Calvin with much gratitude that Dr. Alvin Plantinga, professor of philosophy, received that prize in 2017. President Dill has spoken at various venues on living in a pluralistic world, on the research-supported benefits of a life of purpose, as well as the importance of intellectual humility. Would you join me now in giving a very warm welcome to our presenter, Heather Dill Templeton.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My life has intersected with Calvin University in several different ways, and I wanted to begin by noting three as a note of gratitude and appreciation for this institution. I attended a Christian school outside of Philadelphia, and the head of school at that school for my entire time there, from kindergarten to 12th grade, was a model of servant leadership. And I had the opportunity to be a student under him and then go back and teach in that same school. He was a graduate of Calvin University, and so Calvin has always stood out in my mind because of his witness and his example of leadership. The second is a little over 5 years ago, we recruited one of your own, Matt Walhout, a former professor of physics and a dean here at Calvin University, to come work with us at the John Templeton Foundation. So I'm really grateful for Matt and his contributions. And then finally, as Kristen mentioned, in 2017, the Templeton Philanthropies were delighted to give the Templeton Prize to Professor Alvin Plantinga for his significant contributions to the discipline of philosophy in demonstrating through his argumentation as well as through who he is as a person that belief in God is not only rational, it's a viable and effective argument in philosophical reasoning and dialogue. We were also delighted to have the Calvin University Alumni Choir as part of that celebration in 2017. So I'm grateful to be here, grateful to Calvin for who you are as an institution and what you do in the world. I want to begin with a little context. I work for a private foundation. Our job is to give money away. Now, the money that we give away was given to us by John Templeton, who articulated his mission and vision in a governing document, and also in several books that anyone can purchase and read. This community knows a great deal about philanthropy, and this institution is blessed by philanthropists, both named and unnamed, who have utilized their resources to serve Calvin and the greater Grand Rapids community. So you're no strangers to the blessings of philanthropists and the value of philanthropists who have a clear vision about what they want to support. I start with this context because I want to talk about the work of the John Templeton Foundation. Why did John Templeton create a private foundation? What is our mission, and why does it matter? All philanthropists, especially institutional philanthropists, want to clearly communicate their funding objectives. But we all find it hard to do so in the few words that make up a mission statement. I think that's true for many different kinds of institutions. The John Templeton Foundation has found it difficult in some ways over the years to articulate our mission in a way that was clear, accessible, accurate, and compelling. Today, we describe our work in the following way. The John Templeton Foundation funds interdisciplinary research and catalyzes conversations that inspire awe and wonder. That's what we do. Why does it matter, though? Here's the second half of our mission statement. We look forward to a world where people are curious about the wonders of the natural world, free to pursue lives of purpose and meaning, and motivated by great and selfless love. So what do? We fund research. We catalyze conversations. What motivates us? These are the kinds of contributions we hope to make. Rarely do we get the opportunity, as I have this afternoon, to explain what we do and why it matters. I count it a great privilege to steward the philanthropic legacy of John Templeton, and today it's a privilege to talk about it with you. I do so, though, not for our benefit, but for yours, because I believe that John Templeton created a truly remarkable philanthropic mission that gets at the very heart of what it means to be human and to live well in this world. In 2022, the John Templeton Foundation launched a modest but important update to our brand. The logo stayed the same, the color scheme, font style, and attendant graphics did not change. We issued an updated mission statement, which we later changed again in 2024, and that's the one you see on the screen in front of you. But the most significant change in 2022 was a new tagline: John Templeton Foundation, inspiring awe and wonder. For years, we had been describing our work as science and the big questions to make clear that the foundation supports serious-minded, basic science research that seeks to address deeper questions with a philosophical or even theological relevance. But it was time for a change. We commissioned some market research, hired an accomplished brand consultant, and landed on the concepts of awe and wonder because these words resonated with the audiences we wanted to reach. People interviewed about our work, those who knew us well and even those who knew us less well, used the terms awe and wonder to describe what we do and why it matters. So we tested the language on social media and found that inspiring awe and wonder as a tagline received twice as many clicks as science and the big questions. Science and the big questions is intellectually appealing. Awe and wonder, on the other hand, elicits an emotional response. And we decided that tapping into human emotion would encourage more curiosity about the research we support and attract a wider audience to engage with our work in a meaningful way. So, without a lot of fanfare, we went live. At the time, I observed two things. Inspiring awe and wonder was substantively different than how our peers described their work. Our updated mission statement said, "We fund research and catalyze conversations that inspire awe and wonder." Compare this to how other prominent foundations who also support basic science research described their mission. The Gordon and Betty S. Moore Foundation describes their work as fostering path-breaking scientific discovery and a vibrant ecosystem for science. The Simons Foundation, another funder of basic science research, describes their work as advancing research in basic science and mathematics. One of our great funding partners, the Pew Charitable Trusts, says improve public policy, inform the public, and invigorate civic life. For some of us, using the words awe and wonder seemed a bit out of touch. Can you imagine being at a cocktail party or at some kind of event where someone asks, "What does the John Templeton Foundation do?" And you respond, or in my case, I would respond, "Well, we fund research that inspires awe and wonder." Just not sure how that would land. But when we launched the Templeton Ideas podcast in 2023, we featured a conversation with Professor Dr. Keltner, who had recently published a book on the concept of awe. Here's what stands out about awe as Professor Dr. Keltner explains it. Awe is a space of emotions that transport us out of our self-focused, threat-oriented, and status quo mindset to a realm where we connect with something larger than ourselves. If awe invites us to focus on something or someone outside of ourselves and to go beyond our own personal well-being, then inspiring awe and wonder is not only a perfectly reasonable tagline for a philanthropic organization designed to serve the greater good, the concepts of awe and wonder are downright inspiring, and we should be proudly trumpeting our mission, using the words of awe and wonder wherever we go. Most importantly, though, awe and wonder are not just useful for us at the John Templeton Foundation. They are essential concepts, practices, and ways of being for all of us. As Keltner puts it, awe is an essential component of human experience, and wonder is a consequence of awe. When we come face to face with something that is awe-inspiring, we find ourselves wondering, and we want to learn more. When we begin to study something in more detail, we realize the limits of our understanding. We recognize what we do not know, and this, recognizing what we do not know, inspires a spirit of humility. As I leap from the ideas of awe and wonder to humility, I want to take us back to John Templeton. John Templeton's philanthropic vision started with a reflection on the concept of humility. John Templeton was a pioneer in the mutual fund industry. He started his first mutual fund in 1954 and grew the business into one of the most well-known mutual fund organizations in the world. He ultimately sold the company to Franklin Resources in 1992 and turned his attention fully to his philanthropic interests. But he had published his first book outlining these interests 11 years earlier in 1981. This book, The Humble Approach, Scientists Discover God, starts with all the optimism that characterized John Templeton's worldview. We are perched on the frontiers of future knowledge. The God who created and sustained his evolving universe through eons of progress and development has not placed our generation at the tag end of the creative process. He has placed us at a new beginning. Our role is crucial. We are endowed with mind and spirit. We can think, imagine, and dream. God permits us in some way to be co-creators with him in his continuing act of creation. While John Templeton did not quite put it this way, let me restate his words in the following way. Think of all the challenges we face. They are not challenges, but marvelous opportunities to develop new ideas and create and implement new solutions. There is, however, and here I pick up Templeton's words again, a stumbling block: egotism. The rest of the book reflects on the reality that change is part of the natural world, and change is also an aspect of human experience. The book celebrates human ingenuity in the context of all kinds of changes, and it praises the way in which a humble and open-minded attitude will contribute to human progress. Here's another quote: "Humility is the gateway to knowledge. To learn more, we must first realize how little we already know. The unknown before us may be 1,000,000 times greater than what we now know, despite the myriad discoveries made in recent years." These ideas about humility are the intellectual precursors to what became the John Templeton Foundation, which was established here in the United States in 1987. Today, we are one of the larger private foundations in the country. At the time of its founding, John Templeton limited his giving to $1 million annually. Today, the foundation gives over 100 times that amount every year, providing funding in 6 broad areas of work that support research across dozens of different academic disciplines. In 1987, the foundation's governing founding document listed among its goals supporting the concepts that God's creative processes and purposes have not stopped, but are accelerating, all as described more fully in the book titled The Humble Approach. We have taken this vision on board at the Foundation. Our credo, which captures our aspirations and internal culture, puts humility at the top of the list of 7 core values. Our published core values, which you can find on our website, says that we aim to be humble in our approach, committed to the process of discovery, willing to take risks in pursuit of knowledge, seeking diverse perspectives, and engaging with new ideas. We have used the term humble approach in our mission statement starting around 2002, and we included one of Templeton's favorite mottos, how little we know, how eager to learn, in several previous mission statements between 2006 and 2017. In 2012, the Foundation made its first significant investment into the study of humility, though we pursued a specific line of inquiry into intellectual humility. While John Templeton encouraged open-mindedness with respect to what we know and believe, we found the word intellectual to be an important descriptor for a broader understanding of humility. We set off to refine the concept, to support the development of tools to measure intellectual humility, and to identify interventions, practices that would enable people to become humbler. According to the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley, since 2014, the number of empirical studies on intellectual humility have increased tenfold. Now, I will stop short of attributing all of this to the investments made by the John Templeton Foundation. After all, I'm talking about humility at the moment, and it might not be very humble to suggest that our funding alone has had this kind of impact. But I can point you to the Greater Good Science Center for a treasure trove of what we are learning about intellectual humility. As I do so, I want to emphasize how I describe the information you can find on intellectual humility. Scholars and practitioners have learned a lot about humility, and yet there is so much more to learn. How little we know, how eager to learn. With this in mind, let me offer some insights on the concept and practice of intellectual humility before turning back to awe and wonder. Mark Leary, a psychologist from Duke University, defined intellectual humility as the degree to which people recognize their beliefs might be wrong. We cottoned on to this idea at the John Templeton Foundation in a paper that we published, which you can find on our website, where the authors Nathan Ballantyne and Mark Leary describe intellectual humility as a mindset that guides our intellectual conduct. It involves recognizing and owning intellectual limitations in the service of pursuing deeper knowledge, truth, and understanding. Over the last 10 years, we have seen an increasing interest in intellectual humility. The term started to pop up in cultural discussions. The famed investor Howard Marks of Oak Tree Capital Management used the term in a letter to investors on May 11, 2020. Remember what was happening in the financial markets in the spring of 2020? Howard Marks cited Professor Leary's definition of intellectual humility, which Marks came across in Duke University's magazine Duke Today in 2017. The Greater Good Science Center's website on expanding awareness of the science of intellectual humility links to dozens of articles and podcasts on the term. And Frank Bruni's new book, The Age of Grievance, begins with the kind of critique you might expect from a New York Times columnist, which he is, and ends with a clarion call for intellectual humility. Now, many people have realized the value of humility when they come face to face with their limitations. In the tumult of 2020, Howard Marks saw that everything he knew about how markets work might not apply. Frank Bruni is calling for wide-scale adoption of intellectual humility to address today's social and cultural polarization crises. But there is another way to inspire interest in humility. If humility is a good that we should all pursue, and I submit that it is, do we need to confront an insurmountable challenge to develop a humble and open-minded perspective? Must we face a blow to our pride to accept how little we know? No, not at all. Let's look again at awe and how that might lead us to humility. The John Templeton Foundation funds research and catalyzes conversations that inspire awe and wonder. We do not mean that every grant we support will fill you with awe and wonder. We do mean to say that cultivating awe is a good that goes far beyond a warm feeling during a cold winter walk on a snowy evening, or the utter amazement that comes when the sky turns dark during a solar eclipse. Awe contributes to social goods that benefit all of us. In her recent book, Wonderstruck, philosopher Helen de Cruz describes awe and wonder as self-transcendent emotions, drawing from a paper written in 2021. She writes that the experience of awe and wonder helps us move away from a focus on ourselves and our own concerns. Awe and wonder are emotions, which means we cannot always control when we experience them, and they can have both good and negative orientations On balance, though, if we take time to think carefully about the concepts of awe and wonder, and I think we should, we will see that awe and wonder are not just epistemic in orientation, they are morally transformative. According to Dr. Keltner, the study of awe is relatively new. Prior to this century, emotion science focused on negative qualities, fear, selfishness, psychological anomalies that lead to antisocial behaviors. Drawing upon the science of emotion, Keltner and his colleagues began to query a range of positive emotions and develop definitions or ways of conceptualizing these emotions so that we could study how they emerge, what impact they have, and how to cultivate them. Dr. Keltner and his colleague, Jonathan Haidt, who is now writing widely about the adverse consequences of social media on young people, define awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. Keltner and another colleague explored this definition of awe in more detail by asking 2,600 people from 20 different countries to describe their experience of awe using the definition that Keltner and Haidt had developed. The feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. As Keltner reports in his book, they were able to classify most of these reports along 8 different dimensions. They called them the 8 wonders of life. Those who reflected on this idea, the feeling of being in the presence of something vast, described stories of moral beauty when someone sacrifices their own well-being for another. Stories of the emotional high we feel when we are together in a group of people. Stories of being in nature, listening to soul-lifting music, visual design, spirituality and religion, life and death, and epiphanies as the experiences that elicited a feeling of being present, being in the presence of something vast. Notably, Keltner points out that no one mentioned their devices or their favorite social media app in their stories about experiencing awe. In subsequent studies, Keltner and his colleagues worked to better understand awe and how people experience it. They explored the emotions that people feel when exposed to various kinds of images, and they asked students to record moments in each day where they experience the feeling of being in the presence of something vast. This research suggested that experiencing awe leads to something else that is also self-transcendent. Awe might lead one to a deep sense of gratitude, which is another one of those self-transcendent emotions or dispositions. And awe also leads to wonder. Now, to be sure, awe and wonder are similar concepts, yet Helen de Cruz and others cite some important distinctions. De Cruz writes, "Wonder is the emotion that arises from a glimpse at the unknown terrain which lies just beyond the fringes of our current understanding." She draws upon philosophers as diverse as Descartes and Adam Smith, as well as psychology, to demonstrate that awe leads to wonder. When we experience awe, we may confront something that does not accord with what we know. Something may be awe-inspiring because it doesn't make sense. It's surprising. It's new. This dichotomy between what we thought we knew and what seems different leads to a state of wonder. We try to make sense of the unknown. We feel the need to accommodate this new experience. We realize that we may need to rethink existing frameworks. De Cruz cites Michel Chioda, who also collaborated with Keltner in describing wonder. Wonder is the emotion that arises when we are confronted with gaps in our knowledge. In this sense, awe contributes to a search for knowledge. For an institution such as the John Templeton Foundation that seeks to contribute to our collective understanding about how the world works, a mission that seeks to inspire awe and wonder makes sense. These words are not ethereal concepts meant to evoke only an emotional response. They are robust terms with an active orientation. Dr. Keltner elaborates this point in his book on awe, highlighting research that suggests the experience of awe plays a role in a range of pro-social behaviors. Experiencing awe may help us focus less on ourselves and more on the needs of those around us. Awe increases our appreciation for the role that other people or institutions with which we associate, or the role that our communities, both large and small, play in shaping who we are. Keltner notes that participants in one study designed to test an expansive view, the kind you might have if you're an astronaut in space looking down on Earth, reported a greater sense of humility and a greater sense that the direction of their lives depended on many interacting forces beyond their own agency. This brings us back to the ideas that animated John Templeton. John Templeton advocated humility as the source of progress. Without humility, he wrote, we will not be wide-eyed and open-minded enough to discover new areas for research. It is also in humility, he said, that we learn from each other. For humility makes us open to each other and ready to see things from the other's point of view and to share our ideas freely. These comments from John Templeton focus on our relationships with others. With respect to the scientific enterprise, John Templeton recognized that only now are we beginning to find evidence of hitherto undreamed of forces and even dimensions of reality which transcend the invisible space-time field, which holds together within its astonishing configuration all that we can observe in space and time. There are vast realms reaching out beyond the known, inspiring wonder or awe and inviting inquiry. But it is humility that opens the way forward. How does humility open the way forward? Here's how John Templeton explained it. Gaining knowledge is like working a quarry. As we chip out bits of information, the mining face gets larger and larger. The more knowledge we gain, the more we can see the extent of the unknown. As we grow in knowledge, we grow in humility. And he adds, this may be just as true in studying the soul as in the investigations pursued by natural sciences. While he celebrated the incredible advances wrought by science, John Templeton also praised an article published in Fortune magazine in 1965, which was written by Vannevar Bush, who led the U.S. Office of Scientific Research and Development during World War II. Here is a scientist and advocate of federal support for scientific research. Bush would later go on to create the National Science Foundation, commenting on the role of science in cultivating humility. Science here does things. It renders us humble, and it paints a universe in which the mysteries become highlighted, in which constraints on imagination and speculation have been removed, and which becomes ever more awe-inspiring as we gaze. John Templeton also believed that a disposition of humility leads to open-mindedness. It is difficult, he writes, for a person to learn anything more if he is sure he knows it all already. When we realize how little we know, we can begin to seek and to learn. Unless we recognize our ignorance, why should we investigate? And humility, he said, welcomes engagement with the ideas that are different from ours. If we encourage free and friendly competition of ideas, the truth may more easily emerge. These are some of the ideas that John Templeton articulated in the final decades of the 20th century. He wanted to demonstrate that humility is not a source of weakness. Rather, humility is one of the most important characteristics for ensuring that we continue to grow and advance and contribute to a world where we all flourish in every dimension of our lives. Daryl Van Tongeren's book, Humble, which was published in 2022, captures what scholars have learned about humility. And he too concludes that although humility is not a panacea, he writes, humility is powerfully transformative. It changes lives. It is a boon for healthy relationships, a necessary component for the workplace, and an important part of any society that seeks to grow and change. Van Tongeren also provides a helpful framework for thinking about humility. Whereas the John Templeton Foundation has supported research on intellectual humility, Van Tongeren highlights three other dimensions of humility: relational humility, cultural humility, and existential humility. Relational humility governs how we interact with each other. People who exhibit relational humility focus primarily on the needs of others. Cultural humility describes what it means to live in increasingly diverse and pluralistic communities where people hold different beliefs and have different perspectives on how to address common concerns. Finally, existential humility describes our response to human frailty and mortality. Those who exhibit existential humility are deeply aware of and grateful to God, or something beyond themselves, for what they have been given and the opportunity to serve others in return. This more fulsome understanding of humility provides a fuller picture of what role humility might play in addressing the challenges we face in the 21st century. Van Tongeren's book reviews research that suggests humility, like awe, contributes to a wide range of social goods. Humility might contribute to increased acts of service, a disposition to forgive, a higher likelihood to be generous with time, talent, and treasure, increased wisdom, and a focus on the well-being of others over our own interests. Seen in these ways, we can begin to understand why humility is a good that does not just make us better people, but can make the world a better place. Thus, if humility is an antidote to the challenges in the world today, we should work on cultivating and promoting humility. John Templeton encouraged the adoption of a humble approach in his book. Van Tongeren does the same. He describes humility as a communal effort that begins with us. And how do we start to cultivate and grow a humble and open-minded spirit? One of the first practices that Van Tongeren offers is to experience awe. And here I come back to where I started. Research suggests that those who experience awe grow in humility. Awe is an emotion, and sometimes we discredit emotions in our rational and technological age, but we see in the research on awe and on humility the important role that emotions play in shaping who we are and how we act. Philanthropy is fundamentally interested in improving the world around us. There are different ways of doing that, and countless philanthropists are doing incredible work to address current suffering and current challenges. The John Templeton Foundation contributes to human well-being by funding research to expand our knowledge so that we have better answers to how the world works and how each of us can contribute to human flourishing. John Templeton began by outlining the humble approach. Today, we move forward offering not the, but a humble approach to what we fund and how we use the findings from research that we support to advance human well-being. We are doing that by funding work that inspires awe, leads to a sense of wonder, which in turn engenders humility, and thereby lifts the soul heavenward toward a life of service, sacrifice, and love of humankind. But don't take my word for it. Go out, experience awe, and see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heather. And let me also take a moment now to give a deep thanks to a friend of the January series who underwrote today's presentation and made this possible. So thank you very much. This is now an opportunity for you to ask questions. Those of you online, there's a QR code, or it's askjseries@calvin.edu. So feel free to send those in. And maybe we could just start, Heather. Here we are at Calvin University. Students here are busy in the second semester classes. Professors got to get through all their coursework. We have parents, grandparents probably listening in. What kinds of practices or encouragements in your own experience at the foundation, but perhaps even your own life, for this inspiring awe and wonder? What can we suggest when you often feel weighed down by the burdens and the daily pressures?
I can offer one practice that does come from Dr. Keltner's research. It might be somewhat obvious, something we might recognize once I say it, but sometimes we think of awe as that momentary or infrequent experience that you might only experience when you take time to get away from studies, go out into nature. But he really reinforces the idea that we experience awe every day. We just need to pay attention to it. So for students, for teachers, if there's a way to step back and reflect on what's happening around you, but to recognize that awe, the opportunity to experience awe takes place every single day, we just have to recognize it. And I think it starts by naming the word awe, defining it, and then looking for those experiences on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's great. Making space to let people tell stories that maybe initially don't feel like, where they're going, but allowing that bit of an unexpected surprise to lead us to awe or wonder. And I often think in young children that wonder comes so easily, right? It's
Yes.
the why questions, why this, why that. And so how do we keep nurturing that through the years? It's got to be deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, spending time with children would be a good way.
Right.
Because everything is a little bit awe-inspiring, and that's
All the time, yeah.
encouraging for all of us.
So one of the questions wants to get at your foundation work and thinking about the role a larger foundation, so perhaps like the John Templeton Foundation, might inspire or encourage a much smaller foundation. Perhaps it's just a very small family foundation or other kinds of charitable organizations. What can they learn from you, or what are you perhaps learning from those smaller foundations?
Right. Well, I appreciate that question. I think we can all learn from each other. And so I'll start by what can we learn from other organizations? I find that when I'm in the philanthropic sector, sitting among other philanthropists, there are amazing projects and ideas all over the place. And I'm often so grateful for what other entities, other philanthropists, maybe they're smaller than we are, that's okay, but what they're supporting. So we can always learn from others. What can we provide to those who are philanthropists? One of our approaches to our philanthropy is to work with co-funders. And so we're always wanting to share projects that we support. We sort of take the approach that we will make an initial investment, provide support, but we want other funders to come alongside to fund the follow-up effort or to continue the project. So we would love to be a resource for other funders who are interested in the kind of work that we're doing. And then we're interested in what you might be supporting and how we can be helpful.
Thank you. Would you be willing to share a little bit more of your own story of your formation that brought you here to this role? And you mentioned briefly that you had been a teacher.
Yes.
And obviously this is a family foundation, so influenced by grandfather to begin with, but your own father.
That's right.
So what has been the sort of the leadership transformation for you as you have progressed to this current role?
Sure. So I mentioned that the foundation was started by my grandfather. When he created the foundation in 1987, he made my father president. My father's primary career was serving as a pediatric general surgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so he had a whole nother life outside of the work that he did for his father. And it took me many years to appreciate the work that my grandfather wanted to do in the world, frankly. The big blessing for me is that he wrote many books and many essays. He passed away, my grandfather passed away in 2008, and it was at that point, why I didn't decide this earlier, but it was at that point that I decided to read all of his books, sort of in sequence. I just went right through them. And that task of reading his books, in combination with the relationships I had at that time, helped me to better understand who my grandfather was. So I became much more interested and much more conversant with him and his mission. And then I became a member of the board of trustees of the John Templeton Foundation. So from a very practical perspective, I joined part of the governance structure and served in that capacity for 6 years. And then came into the role when my father passed away in 2015, which was part of a plan to prepare for my father's transition, which likely would have occurred in 2018 in any case. So that's about what happened. But the important thing is the relationships I had in combination with reading what my grandfather left behind.
Yeah, thank you. In the field, in the world of philanthropy, do you see changes coming down the road? Or what have you been observing again in these last years in a very unique position as president of a foundation? And as you look ahead and perhaps get ready to hand off leadership at some point to the next person, what are you looking ahead at and seeing?
So with respect to the field of philanthropy, first I'd start by there's always change. My grandfather celebrated change. He was known for saying, if you're doing the same thing today that you were doing 5 years ago, you probably need to make a change in what you're doing. So I've seen some change during my tenure, and I do think that change will come. What I've seen is a flourishing of different varieties of philanthropy. You've always had individuals who just give out of their own resources. And then there was sort of this time period where people who wanted to give in a more methodical way that lasted beyond their lifetime would form a private foundation. You still see a lot of that happening today, but then people have innovated and want to give and be involved in charity using a variety of different mechanisms, and that has added to the vibrancy of philanthropy. So I see that going forward. I do see, I guess I would say, our sense of what generosity and giving has widened and changed, and so we count a lot of numbers in this country and keep track of giving. We've seen a decline in giving, which is not a good thing, so what I hope to see going forward is that that would be changed and we'd actually see continued growth in giving of all kinds. But we've also seen a wider appreciation for giving that takes place outside of maybe a financial transaction. And that is the kind of work we do for others when we volunteer or when we just take our neighbor to the grocery store because they need to get to the grocery store and they don't have another way of doing that. You can't count that in your numbers. So there's a wider appreciation for that, but also a sense in which we need to generate more volunteerism and giving around the world.
I noticed on the website that you are part of a generosity commission.
That's right.
Do you want to say just a little bit more about that?
Sure. So what I was just talking about draws from my involvement on something called the Generosity Commission, which was a nonpartisan group of funders and nonprofit leaders who came together in response to the reports that giving was on decline. And it's one thing to note that giving is on decline, but volunteerism was also declining. So both of those things together are not good for any society, for our society. And so we came together to figure out what are those trends, where are they coming from, where do we see bright spots, and what could help engender that cultural impulse that has always been part of what it means to live here in the United States, of giving generously of our time, talent, and treasure.
Thank you, yeah. Got a lot of questions, great ones coming in. Someone wondered about the early experience your grandfather had with traveling, so getting outside of the United States.
Yes.
Do you have any stories or something you can share about how that influenced the eventual setting up of the foundation?
Yes. So my grandfather earned a Rhodes Scholarship and made his way over to Oxford University for 2 years. And then after that, he decided to travel around the world. And he made his way from Europe, from the UK into Europe, down into sort of the southern Europe, Mediterranean, across into the Middle East, and all the way across to Asia. So visited a lot of countries. The way the story is told is that he didn't buy the top ticket. He bought whatever ticket he could get onto the boat to get to various places. But that taught him two things. One, that there were many business enterprises happening around the world that were both exciting and investing opportunities. So once he came back to the States and sort of established himself, he ultimately became known as one of the first global investors who said, you know what, we can invest in companies that are located outside the United States, and there are opportunities for incredible contribution by making those investments, but also growth opportunities. And then that experience of traveling around the world also introduced him to the many ways in which faith is expressed around the world. There are many different ways that the Christian faith is expressed around the world. And then, of course, there are many different faith traditions, and he developed an appreciation for that. When it came to establish the Templeton Prize, which was his first philanthropic institution that he created, and then ultimately the John Templeton Foundation and other organizations, he wanted to support the vibrancy of religious belief and practice across faith traditions because, in part, of that trip around the world.
Yeah, that's great. Of course, we're here at Calvin University. We fully believe in study and learning and research and science, and yet we know there's a lot of resistance to science and scientific study. How has that been addressed, or different ways that you've bumped up against that in the work of the foundation and the funding of so many major scientific projects?
Well, one of the main themes in the book, The Humble Approach, that I talked about in my comments, is on the opportunity for people of faith and those in the natural sciences to learn from each other. And part of the message that my grandfather tried to convey is that we actually, religion, religious belief and practice, and science are different ways of understanding the world around us, and they have a lot that they can learn from each other. So that is one of the reasons he created the foundation in the first place. And it has been part of our objective over the years to facilitate that conversation, to make it possible. So we kind of bump up into those who do not see the value of supporting or elevating science within sort of religious thinking. We bump into those on the scientific side who don't see the value of bringing religion into the conversation. But our experience has really been to just find those who are interested in bridging that gap or bridging that divide and to support their efforts. And so we did that initially with a wonderful program called the Science and Religion Course Program, where teachers, scholars, researchers could submit a grant to start a course. What a great way to get people thinking about a concept like science and religion working together than to start a course and engage undergraduate students in that kind of conversation. And that has led to a whole variety of work over our time, including a lot of support for BioLogos, which is a wonderful organization based right here in Grand Rapids with other wonderful connections to Calvin.
I wonder if you could just say maybe a little bit more about, so your focus on awe and wonder and the importance of humility, and then how gratitude also, of course, plays in. But I wonder too about just this idea of patience, that these qualities, these explorations aren't instantaneous.
Right.
They often unfold over many, many years. And so how do we also cultivate that fortitude for doing this kind of work, awe, wonder, a humble approach?
Yeah. So I will say a couple things about patience. One is just the nature of research. Research is incremental and cumulative. So that's where patience comes into play. One research project will take you a few steps down the road, and then you need another research project to come and build. And so one project that we might fund, typically our projects are 3 years, will achieve some milestones and make some contributions, but then it needs to be built upon and continued. So patience really is aligned with our view that scientific advance is incremental and cumulative. The other perspective I might share is that with respect to awe, wonder, humility, gratitude, generosity, curiosity, a whole range of virtues that we all might want to develop, they take time. You can make progress and you can also backtrack. And so I think part of the process is recognizing that we can change, and yet developing these kinds of virtues is a lifetime effort. They always need to be cultivated. So that's part of the patience. Patience for others who might be trying to develop these virtues, and then patience and a healthy recognition for ourselves that we also need to be working on the continual cultivation of virtue.
Has there been any interesting the fact that you're a female in the world of philanthropy. So any particular insights or perspectives that you've really experienced in this unique role, which I don't know if that's a changing environment or all, so you could tell you a little bit more about that. But yes, the role of women in the field and the world of philanthropy.
I get that question a lot, so I'm happy to reflect on that. I mean, philanthropy, I think, in general, has more female CEOs than other fields. I mean, obviously, that changes. And what I would say is there are some amazing women and men leading philanthropies around the country. And I find philanthropy to be a charitable sector in the sense that we're charitable with each other in our time and our willingness to engage. So I think as a woman, it has been a blessing to have other peers in leadership at the level of CEO who have a lot more wisdom and who have been incredibly generous with their time in sharing that with me. So I think that's what stood out to me. And that goes from sort of the CEO level, but to other high-level positions in philanthropic organizations, senior leadership, directors of programs, and so on.
Well, Heather, it's been delightful to talk with you. And I wonder, as we close out, if you have any last words of encouragement, just in general about a humble approach to the work we all do each day. It's a variety of work, no doubt, but this posture of humbleness, I think, transcends all kinds of occupations. And what might you leave us with today?
I guess I would leave you with the fact that I spoke a lot about humility, but humility is closely tied to curiosity. And so as you go out to try to practice humility or experiencing awe, which will lead you to wonder, which would engender humility, curiosity goes hand in hand. And so that's asking questions and wanting to explore when you're faced with something that is surprising, new, or is difficult to understand. So that's what I would leave you with.
Heather is available to greet you in the West Lobby right outside these doors. Would you please join me now in thanking Heather for joining us today?
Thank you.
Go in peace.